For the past 4 years, I've been traveling the world, and on my journey across these continents, I've met countless fascinating individuals who all have different perspectives on life.
I knew from the moment I met those women that I had to tell their stories.
From Olympic athletes who performed at the highest level to artists who create unbelievable work and refugees who have overcome the most difficult of challenges. Each and every single one of them has their own formula for life, and I'm here to find out what that is.
What they wanted, whether they knew it or not, is they wanted to be inspired.
My name is Trevor Carlson, and this is the Formula Podcast.
First of all, thanks for having me on. Excited to chat today. Quick 30-second intro, man. I was born in London. My dad is English. My mom is from India. I have dual citizenship. Grew up in Dallas and been in Austin for the last 18 years, working in tech and specifically performance marketing. Kind of ridden the wave of tech here in Austin over the last decade or so. And it's been amazing, to be honest. I feel very lucky to be here. I definitely lucked out. I knew I didn't want to go back to Dallas after I graduated and just kind of stayed on and it just exploded. I love living here. Been at AppSumo for about 7 years and started just doing paid ads contracting specifically with Meta, and went really well. So came on to manage all the paid ads and then all of growth. And it's been a wild ride, man. I think I was the sixth or seventh hire at AppSumo. And, I think we have about 80 or 90 full-time people. And, we're going to do almost 90 million in revenue this year. It feels good to be part of something. I really have learned so much. It's been an MBA, but they pay you to do it. And I would encourage anybody that is looking to learn a skill, a relevant skill, is to join a fast growing startup and you kind of become a generalist. You have to be to learn a bunch of things very quickly on the fly. And then hopefully the company can do as well as AppSumo did, because you really gain that experience, not just like being there, but it working. And I think that's where my career has really taken off of, now I do consulting. I mentioned Cast Magic earlier. I have a couple other companies that I consult for, really around this exact thing, around performance marketing and analytics and marketing strategies. I love talking about it. I love doing it. I definitely love the marketing part more than the management part. And that's why I love growth, man. I just love being in the weeds, and it's kind of a game for me of, you do something and you see the numbers go up or down. I love it. And it's something that I really want to talk about more. I want to build my own brand around. I don't want to do more consulting and help companies maybe that were in AppSumo shoes like 5 or 6 years ago, and can really help them unlock growth to get to where we are now. So been talking a lot more about that recently.
So when you say growth, what does that mean to you? Because I think to different people it means, obviously it's like we got bigger, but what does that mean to you when you're talking about growth?
Yeah, good question. I think the definition may change over time at a company. I think at the beginning, everybody at the company is in growth. Everybody is trying to grow the company. I don't care if you're in product, customer support, or in growth marketing. Like, you're all trying to do the same thing, and you're just doing it in different ways. Back then, it was kind of a different role where, wear many hats and was working on a lot more things. And it was really fun, but everybody kind of had the same mission. We were doing under 10 million, and we were just all talking about ways that we could grow the business. And it was cool because, when you have 6 or 7 people there, you're a very tight knit team, and everybody's voice matters. So that's what growth meant to me back then. And it was really about kind of like teamwork towards, this collaboration of like, oh man, we're trying all these things. We made a lot of mistakes, and I think we made it more complicated than it had to be, looking back in hindsight. And now it's a little different, now I'm a little bit more of a specialist of really focused on acquisition, customer acquisition. There are two sides of a business acquisition and retention. You got to get the customers, and then you got to get the customers to keep coming back, or keep happy. Growth now, as I define it, is we want to expand the pie. That is my main goal at AppSumo, and really with the consulting clients that I have as well. Of we want to grow our audience. We want to reach more people in an efficient way. We don't have a massive Sequoia Series C, D, E funding. Like, we want to grow in an efficient way. And that for me is what growth is. It's not throwing money at a problem and just hoping that, something returns. It is spending it in a smart way with a very clear goal in mind of when you're going to get that money back. That is why, retention and acquisition are so tightly intertwined in my world. At least I think, there are some companies that are unprofitable. Still, Uber being a good example, and their market share is their goal. They want to just capture everything they can. I think they may have had a profitable quarter recently. But to be worth billions and be losing hundreds of millions is kind of wild to me. And that's not a luxury that 99% of companies out there can afford to have. And so I really like growth from the standpoint of smaller companies, of like, we don't have a lot of money or resources or a huge team. We're trying to figure this out together, and we're trying to grow in an efficient way and profitably. So it can be sustainable growth. And that is really where I've kind of laser focused in now. And that's kind of where the analytics piece ties into it as well, of like, does the dollar that you spent yesterday, like, do you know, first of all, what it returned in the first day? Do you know what channels that really it came in from? And then do you know how long it took you to get that dollar back in profit? And most companies have no idea. They're just like, Facebook is telling me that I have a 18 ROAS, so like, I'm just going to keep throwing money at it. That's good, right? But it's a little bit more complicated than that. And I think as you grow and as you scale, your marketing mix becomes more complex. And so the customer journey also becomes more complex. I wish it was like they see an ad and then they purchase, 30 seconds later, and there's no other path or no other channel that is in that mix. But that's just not the reality of it. And the more that you spend, this well, the more that you spend at the top of the funnel, it affects channels in the mid or bottom of the funnel. And so you kind of have to parse through all this data and make these conclusions of, I'm going to assign a weight to this channel here, even though it's not contributing 100% to last click. Maybe there's another channel that it is assisting and helping with conversions. And so it's always a struggle talking to founders, and this better than anybody, of like, hey, I spent this much money, and they're like, how much money did you get back for me? And can you prove it? And it's very difficult to do. And it's a conversation that I have all the time. And I think what I try to preach is like, hey, we have to let the data tell us. We can't make assumptions. And usually if we're doing 3 or 4 different channels, it's going to be a little bit more complex than just that one-to-one that I think everybody wants it to be. So that's kind of how I think about growth now, is really from the standpoint of small businesses, and then how can I help them, with what I learned at AppSumo.
I have my marketing ad agency where we work with e-com and like SaaS companies, generally doing like lead gen for them. And then I have another company that's kind of been accidentally spun up. So I started a travel YouTube channel just as like, I travel around like digital nomad style. I hate using that word, but digital nomad style, because I feel so pretentious. I'm like, I'm a digital nomad, Nick. So while I was moving around, I just started making videos for fun. And then over time, just kind of grew that channel to like 30K subscribers.
Nice.
And then in that process, like, I would meet other business owners traveling. Turns out like hiking and doing stuff like that, you meet a lot of other interesting people. Typically that's like my best lead gen activity to date, is just like going and doing stuff and meeting people organically.
And at the top of the mountain.
It's so funny because I'm talking to this guy and he's like, oh, how would you grow my business? And his wife is like sitting there just like thinking like, would you shut up and stop talking about this stuff? Yeah, it's like, we're supposed to be on vacation. I ended up meeting that dude. He has an adventure travel company. Went out with him, did a trip, recorded the whole thing, and made like a nice promo video for him. And he booked a bunch of business off of it. I did a Muay Thai camp for a few months, made a video on that. He made a killing on that for the amount that he paid for that video. And I've kind of accidentally started just that. And I'm realizing I feel like there's some opportunity there with not just me being like the person traveling around making the travel company type content, but with hiring or working with other videographers. So part of the questions I have are selfishly related to focus and growth and stuff like that around some of the things I'm
sure.
working on. Because I feel like giving specific examples, I know I sent you the list and I was like, hey, if you had to give 3 pieces of advice to any company anywhere, how would they grow? Both of my companies are they're not very big. So they're pretty small. I have a small team on like the ads agency side, like maybe 4 people plus a small group of freelancers. And then on the other side, it's basically just contractors who help with editing or maybe do some filming here and there. But if a company is in that stage where they haven't hit that period of growth where they're able to kind of go from everybody's wearing every hat possible to everyone's kind of has their lanes, their specialty that they're living in. I guess if you're in that type of situation, or let's say you're sitting down with a customer who's maybe doing, maybe 5 low 6 figures a month, trying to get up to like the next tier, what do you walk them through? Like how do you do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And then, the non-answer is it really depends on the company and the type of customer. But I think just in general, kind of thinking about it from what has worked so far. I think that's really the first thing that I look at or I talk to founders is like, let's go into the data and from what we can pull out, what are the channels? If you're trying to close more clients, what is the outreach? What is the type of customer that has really worked the best? And I think it's like before you can run and explore growth, I think you need to take a step back first and understand the growth that you've had already. Try to piece together the people that have maybe paid you the most. So if you're maybe an e-com company, like who are the highest LTV clients, who are purchasing the most, highest profit. If you're a SaaS company, like who is the lowest churn type of client. And if you're an agency, it's like who has stuck around the most, like who, when I work with, it's easy. And agencies, you can kind of see that very quickly. It's either you're working uphill and you're like constantly trying to prove your value, or someone just gets it and you're like, you're like the hero of the company. And so I really try to take that step back first with the customer or with my client and say, hey, let's just go into the business and say, do you know really who this ideal customer, ideal client is for you? And the answer is normally no. Like we're just saying, hoping that it like comes back with more profit. And it kind of seems like a non revenue generating exercise, like a step backwards to be like, no, we need to like go test. We need to go spend more on Facebook ads, or we need to test this other tactic. And it's like, the tactics will not get you there. It's the strategies of really sound steps of defining who you are really going after. Who is your best customer? What channels have worked so far? And then after we review all of this data, we then go and look at, all right, do we need to make another hire in one of these areas? Like you actually brought in a lot of clients or a lot of customers from this one video campaign. Well, like what if you did 10 more of those videos a month and you stopped doing everything else that you were doing? What if you hired somebody to just do this video production for you? Or but what if it's an influencer or affiliate program? Like what if you hired somebody to just do that and you take it off your plate and they can just do that for 3 months or 6 months and you see what kind of results that you get from there. So, usually those first 2 questions don't have answers, have to be defined, of taking the step or 2 steps back and then saying, okay, where can we accelerate here where you would have a lot of confidence that this could actually return? If it's a hire, or if it's ad spend, or if it is investing in a new affiliate program, you would have a lot of confidence. And we together, make a decision saying, this is the bet that we're taking based on what we have seen so far of either customer profit or growth so far. And then we try to limit the other things that we're doing. I think that is a thing that I see in almost every single company at that size, under $2 or $3 million, is like you're doing a lot of different things. Usually 80% of those things are not really doing anything for the business. And you think that they are pleasing the clients, or you think that they're getting more customers, but they're really not. And it's usually the 20% that is doing 80%. And I've seen this time and time again. Really, when we're talking about growth channels specifically, I think it's a very common and understandable thing to be like, hey, I want to try all these things. I want to chase after the shiny object platform that someone else said that really worked for them. But that's a tactic, not a strategy. Tactics change, but strategies don't. So I think what you have to really take a step back and say is like, who's the customer? What channel has worked? And then what channel is right for me to get more of these customers? You really have to think about it just with your own business, not thinking about everybody else's. And so making that decision and trying to focus on that channel or that type of client is usually the thing that I would recommend first. And it seems pretty common with startups about that size.
When you don't necessarily know, like take that step back and look at who your target customer is, and then also understanding where you have had success, or like even who you want to have success with in the future. Like you could have had great success. I mean, anybody who's run ads probably knows what it's like to work. Like it's very easy to get low paying, high touch clients that really, really want to like they want a lot of your time and attention, and then they don't have much of a budget. It's really easy to get those, but are those the ones that you want? Are those the ones that are going to set you up for success in the future? And so personally, most of our success and growth, which is, I think it's like it's a good and bad thing, is most of it is just from like networking, warm introductions. That's because I feel like with running ads as an ad agency, it is highly competitive. And you're basically, man, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the prospects that come in that way are usually a lot more defensive than like warm introductions, because there's a lot of bad actors in like the digital marketing space, and I feel like a lot of those folks have had a rough go with at least one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, we could talk about Hyros, but we'll save that for another another episode. So I think that I did experiment with that, but I found it to be a lot of calls with a lot of how are you going to prove that this is going to work? We already tried this with somebody else. We don't really want to pay. We want like a prove it deal type of situation versus, where you kind of give your time to an organization like maybe Techstars or someone like that, and you get introduced to startups and you give them free advice. And then that's actually how Ramon and I met. I was like a marketing advisor for Techstars. And when he was with, what was it? Trend. Yeah, when he was working on Trend. And I feel like that had a higher ROI than the money spent on ads. But it's like, how do you then take that? And it's the same thing with like the travel stuff. How do you take that non-scalable thing, or maybe it is scalable, I don't know, and then turn that into actionable data, actionable growth?
At that size, man, I think you don't really need to think about scale. I think you think about like doing less of the in the weeds work and more to focus on growing the business. And so, yeah, I think that's also another thing that I see is like, companies that are doing under $1 million a year, and like they're constantly thinking about, well, what happens if it scales, or how would we grow it? It's like, just do it first and you'll find out pretty quickly that can scale. Thing will break, but like break the thing first, like have the problem first before you try to solve it. So, Paul Graham has a good post about this and doing things that don't scale, especially early on. I'm a big believer in it. I think hand-to-hand combat kind of marketing is a great way to find something that actually works. And then I think after you understand, maybe it's, these networking happy hours is like the best place to do this. It's like, what if you stopped all other client acquisition efforts and you did one networking happy hour a month that you organized, or you sponsored Techstars or Capital Factory or one of these Y Combinator where you think your customer could be, that you're trying to recruit to your agency, and like you just did that. And you could even hire somebody to organize the event for you. And so, a lot of times, like, this is why I always say people like overcomplicate this. Founders overcomplicate what they are doing because they really feel like if they're not doing something, if they're not moving really quickly and testing a lot of things, they're not doing anything, which is just not true. It's a great way to get burnt out, of trying to continuously test new things and be in the weeds all the time. And like, it's just not sustainable. And so, it hurts sometimes to say like, hey, I'm going to let go of a couple of these channels, maybe that are bringing in lower quality or, lower spending clients. But if I'm focusing on the growth of this agency long term, I want to look at where my best clients have come from, where it's easy for me to provide value to them, and just do that thing and provide a lot less complication, but more clarity in the direction of the business. And then, I think you can then think about scale after you are doing this more manually.
Yeah.
But it's like people stress too much about this. Like
For
the
sure.
reality is, I think it's over 90% of companies, including agencies, fail within the first 2 years. One, because of they run out of runway, and then two, because of burnout. Like, it's not sustainable to operate like this, and it's also not going to be the thing that gets you to that 5x or 10x growth.
Some of those things really hit home because I'm 36 now, so this was a long time ago. Out of college, I started like a meetup group where we did like weekly coffee with business owners and things like that, and
Cool.
that ended up growing till we're having like 50 people per meetup, and it led into a shit ton of opportunities. Even we co-founded a startup in the health tech industry. We built software for hospitals to coordinate care for Alzheimer's family caregivers. Even though I made that group probably cost me money to start, and it definitely cost me a lot of time. All those relationships that were built through that, and just like hanging out and talking to these people just by proximity, led to these other opportunities. This is good for a lot of people to hear because it's, if you're like, oh, well, I don't have time to go to this like coffee meetup with like all these other people who are business owners and whatever, but it's building that relationship with somebody. You never really know where that's going to go. I think I've read Paul Graham's essay forever ago. It was from 2008 or something.
Yeah.
The doing things that don't scale. It's showing up, putting in the work, and then building that relationship and that trust. And you never really know where things compound to over the future. You're providing a lot of value too for these people because you're introducing them to other people in this network. What's the Gary Vee thing? Like jab, 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 something.
I think the value add up front, and like pulling business in versus trying to push out a promotion all the time or an ad to try to intercept business is for agencies, but also for customer acquisition. For any company, ecom, SaaS, whatever it is. I really believe that's the two ways to either get attention or customers is like you can focus on the short term. I want to just run this ad campaign or send this blast out and I want someone to buy right now. Like, I'm trying to get them to do something for me. Like, that is the attitude versus how can I push out this sale, provide value first, and try to pull in the sale versus push out a promotion to get it. And push versus pull marketing is something that I think about a lot. I think it's a balance of the two. Organic is definitely a pull form of marketing. It takes a long time to build up your rankings, let's say in search engines, to build up your domain authority, or on social channels, like, well, it takes a long time to build up a subscriber list, to put out a lot of content, and you have to be really consistent. And in the short term, it doesn't make any sense. And I think businesses that want to grow quickly, they have a hard time investing in those kinds of channels. And it's the same for networking events as well. It's like, what is this going to do for me? Like, I'm wasting my time, having a shitty coffee at a place that I don't want to be at. And in your brain, it's like counterproductive. But really what you're doing, like you said, is seeding these ideas or relationships that can return tenfold in the future, I think, if nurtured correctly. And I think the same thing with leads or customers. Like, if you provide the value up front and you nurture it correctly, then you're almost creating a chance for the sale to happen and making it happen in a more organic way with higher conversion rates maybe and a lower spend to get there versus always trying to sell on day one. And I think it's an important lesson for for first-time founders or any early stage startups that are looking for that growth immediately. A lot of people don't have that cash runway to be like, oh, I'm gonna, wait 2 years to acquire any customers. And so maybe the balance is more on the short term at the beginning. But I always think that something in your marketing has to be invested into that pull long term, organic based, could be online or offline types of marketing that are going to give something to this person without asking anything in return. And eventually you will nurture this lead into a sale if it's the right fit, if that's the channel, or organic channel or event type that is good for your business and has the right kind of person, the ideal customer persona that is attending it or, in this channel. It's really a balance, and it's something that I see in almost every business of trying to strike it, because one pays off or can pay off quickly and the other does not. And trying to get a business owner with limited funds to understand that concept can be difficult. It's a very proven marketing strategy, right? It's not anything new. It's been around for a long time, and I think I always think about it versus the earned media, the owned media, and maybe paid as a third bucket. Push first pull, another way to put it.
Yeah, man, I completely forgot about this. I have other questions for you on how you're able to like balance all this stuff, and because I feel like you
Sure.
just have to have this like superhuman ability to focus or like split your focus. So first business I started, I was like an online poker tournament player, and then when that went away, I had some cash, and I was like, okay, what can I do? I don't want to work for anybody else, so worked with some friends to start a food cart company. Of course, none of us had any idea what we were doing, so it did not go well. But when that closed, I applied for a bunch of jobs. I was just, well, literally, I'm broke now. I will literally take any job. And some car dealership was like, we'll hire you today. I'm like, all right, sick, let's go. And I hated that job so much. But one of the things that I remember doing is I would always talk to the people that came in, and they'd always tell me like other stuff they're up to. You just sit there all day at this dealership. Like most of the time, you're not doing anything. So what I would do is after having these conversations with people, I'd be like, this person just moved here. They're looking for a good restaurant. I'm going to like look up a restaurant they'll like and send it to them, send them some recommendations. And I'm not even going to talk about the car they looked at because they'll come back if they want it. And I feel like that me just sending out like hey, thanks for stopping by. I know you said you want like a good Indian restaurant. I'd go check out this place. This is a good dish. Just doing that and being a normal person probably brought me more like car sales when I was there than any of the crappy stuff that they do where they're like, hey, what I don't know, whatever. I don't
Yeah.
know too much about the car industry after that to ever trust another car dealership. But yeah, it's like the little things that you do to build those relationships over time. I think those really add up. If you're not in like, I think if you get impatient or greedy, you can, maybe greed's too strong of a word, but it's like you just want that
No, I
sale
think
so
it's,
bad. You think that's the proper
yeah,
word?
I
Yeah.
think it's a perfect word for it. I think a lot of people want that instant gratification. I think it's a
Hmm.
big part of our culture nowadays, of people just wanting that success right now. And, they stress a lot about getting the success versus, what are the inputs that would lead to the success in the future. So, yeah, man, it's a very common thing to go through. And that's why I think the people that are successful, the things in the short term, they don't really sweat as much. If your acquisition cost goes up, or, your revenue goes down 1 month, it's like you're thinking about like the 2 or 3 year vision, not the 1 month vision.
Hmm. That's a good point. I think that should be like at the beginning of every marketing course or book. Like stop being in such a hurry to close the deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
also, man, people are savvy shoppers now. They don't really shop the same way that they used to. And people really buy from social proof, or people buy from people more than they do from a company or from an agency. And they kind of see through these sales tactics a lot more now, and they don't believe them, or they don't think the company is out for their best interest. There's more of a empowering of the individual movement of like, hey, I want to know exactly what's happening here, and I'm only going to buy if I see other people doing it, and there's a lot of social proof, or an influencer that I follow is telling me that this is something that I should have. And I think it's a distrust of companies that has definitely arisen over the last 10 or 20 years. I think that people are just more savvy with technology, and so they can see through these things easier. And so it's really forced companies' marketing departments to evolve and do different things and be creative and more authentic. And one thing that we've done at AppSumo is come up with this customer persona, like I mentioned earlier, this ICP, ideal customer persona, of who we want to go get, right? But I think one step further is, who is the persona of the person that your customer trusts? So a trust persona of who is the person that they follow, maybe on social media, who do they watch on YouTube? And that's really how they are kind of serving their advertising or their marketing, through this person as the voice of the company, through better sponsorships or partnerships. And you see this, with MKBHD going in with Ridge Wallet, or there's countless examples of this. Nick Huber just buying Shepherd, and I know that Sean Puri is an investor there as well. So
like
like these
Hormozy and
creator-led
Schooled.
brands, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the School example is a good one. Creator-led brands, and the brands are understanding this and bringing them in as equity partners, and are able to sell through that person versus like trying to sell through the company. And so I think it really is going back to what you were saying of like, you have to evolve and get more creative and sell in different ways that are not overtly selling. Like the worst ads look like ads, and not many people realize that fact. It's like, if it looks like an ad on your feed, what do you think the click-through rate, the conversion rate is going to be to someone else that is like UGC style video, mobile optimized? It doesn't look like an ad at all, and people recognize that, and they see it pretty quickly.
I read a very old sales book. People don't want to be sold. They want to buy. They don't want to have to be convinced that they need something.
Exactly.
They want to make a choice that this is something that they want. So bring it back a little bit. So you mentioned before we even jumped on the podcast, you just sold a company. You're working as head of growth at AppSumo. You're consulting on Cast Magic, and I imagine I don't know what your exact title is at Cast Magic, but imagine you're doing it for a few other companies as well. I don't know what your batting average is, but it seems to be very high. And you seem to do a very good job in each of these roles. So how do you manage all of that and also show up full time in your role? Because it seems like you're doing a lot. The activities do seem similar, but I know that every project kind of takes up some amount of bandwidth. I'm just curious how you're able to pull that off. What's your process, secret, whatever it is?
Definitely no secret, but I appreciate the kind words. I think you mentioned the projects being similar, and that's really kind of how I think about it. Of the role that I have at AppSumo, I love doing, I love working there, but I also want to help other people with the knowledge that I have gained over the last 7 years at AppSumo, and then another 8 or 9 years before that at other startups. And so that's something that I really want to do, and AppSumo empowers us to have side hustles. Was the first thing. I think some companies look down on it, and they kind of vilify this of like, why are you doing anything else besides what we're paying you to do? And I don't think that's the right way to retain a top talent, first of all. And so I think AppSumo recognizes that, and we do a good job of it. We also serve solopreneurs, so people that have companies, have side hustles that they're running and making money from and using AppSumo tools. It helps you do your job better. And that for me is very true with the consulting side of it, because I use AppSumo tools on the consulting side. And I also do very similar things with the consulting clients that I do at AppSumo. That's not to say that it doesn't take a lot of time. I think compartmentalizing these things is very important. I think structuring your day is very important. A book that kind of changed the way that I work was something that I read during COVID, was Atomic Habits. And there were some
Nice.
lessons in there that I still use today. I mean, James Clear, I think it's still the best-selling book on Amazon. So it's definitely not a deep cut hidden secret here. But sometimes I think the right book at the right time can go a long way. And for
Yeah.
me, that book really hit at that time. And it was really about structuring your environment for positive habits, structuring your day in a way that you can control it, and compartmentalizing things and to where you can do more and make it easier for yourself. So for me, I use a planner. It's actually the Full Focus Planner from Michael Hyatt. Been using it for 3 or 4 years now. I love it because I can structure each day the night before, and I look at my AppSumo work and I look at all of my side business work in two different buckets. I try to use the 7 to 9 a.m. time frame to work on all of my side hustles. It's when I'm most focused, I think, in the morning. It's when I get the least amount of Slacks and emails, and I can really put myself into this and knock a lot of work out. And so using that time for me is very productive on the weekends as well. And then I have my AppSumo tasks that go from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 normally. I try to structure my day in a way that I understand how much time I have in my day. So if I'm looking at it the night before, I'll actually write out every single meeting that I have, literally in the right hand column here, and then all of the time in between the meetings. So if I have 5 meetings and those take up 5 hours and I only have 8 hours in the day, you have 3 hours to do things that are not meeting related. Honestly, you have less time than that because of meeting hangover. I really believe that you can't go from one thing to another and be 100% focused. So the 3 hours are actually 2 hours, right? And so thinking about it in a real way of what could I get done in 2 hours, structuring your day and the things you're trying to accomplish that fit into the time that you actually have. And that for me, it was a game changer of I used to go into my days and answer 800 Slacks and be on 8 meetings and be like, wow, I really had a productive day, but I don't know what the fuck I just did, nothing actually meaningful. And so actually saying, hey, you have to create time in the day. Honestly, you have to make time for the things that matter the most and prioritizing the things that you're doing in a way that the thing that is most important should be done first in the first available time slot that you have, and then the
How do
respective
you
items after
prioritize?
that. For me, I mean, I think it's about what is time sensitive. If it's something that I need to submit this week or today, then I prioritize that first. I try to do a full sweep on Sundays of everything that I accomplished or everything that I need to accomplish this week that could be highest leverage for either AppSumo or consulting businesses. What is the one thing, if I were to accomplish today, it would make the most difference? And I can guarantee you that's not being on 8 meetings. So it is doing something, creating something that is actually going to move the needle. So highest leverage is the second thing after, time sensitive. And I think both short term and long term for that leverage, not what's going to move the needle this week, but what could I be working on that could do it next quarter or next year? And so balancing those things and I try to put in, before the week starts, what those highest leverage tasks are. And then planning out the week becomes a lot easier because I know exactly what is at the top. And the day before, try to plan out for the next day and not have that to-do list change. This is the thing that I said to myself that was highest leverage. And so I don't want to add anything else the day of that comes before that thing, because then you're not really using the prioritization in a very good way. So I think that's really, man, there's no secret to it. It's just looking at your day and being able to control it a little bit more. And I think also if you want to do something, man, that is bigger than what you're doing now, if you have a 9 to 5 and you're like, man, I really want to start a company and have financial freedom or time freedom, doing the same things is not going to get you that result. Who you are now has to change, right? You have to be a different person in 3 months or 6 months. And so understanding that fact and saying, all right, well, maybe I can't wake up at 9, and go to bed at 1 a.m., right? Maybe I have to go to bed earlier and wake up at 6 and have 2 hours before work starts to accomplish the things that I want. Creating time, it for me is a real principle. Time can appear out of thin air in your day if you want it to be. And I think people waste a lot of time as well on things the 4-hour work week comes to mind. In a 40-hour work week, I think people probably work, 5 to 6 hours max, I would say, of actual work, maybe even less than that. So how can you be effective? Not just kind of signaling that you're busy. And so, these are kind of tough questions you got to ask yourself.
How old are you? Are you early 30s?
30.
Late 20s? You were what? 37?
37.
What? No. Damn. Okay. So you're
Yeah.
you're about 6 months older than me. So I think when I was probably in my late 20s after I left a startup I was at, dude, I was killing myself for this company that and I mean I slept on the office floor on my yoga mat a few times. It was just a wild wild time. And I remember after like 6 months waking up and being, I don't remember anything that I did. Like it's like June, and I don't think I did anything between January and June. And so I started really getting into how can you slow down time, I guess. And it was when you're multitasking, when you're so consumed in like 100 different things, you can't even remember what you had for lunch yesterday. I just remember
Mhm.
thinking, what kind of life is that? You're just so caught up in everything going on around you. You're not really living anymore. And I think a lot of people are living life that way where, and I find myself guilty of it still today where, you're trying to single task and get something done, then Slack pops up, a Slack message pops up, email pops up, somebody calls you. Now you've gone down like 8 rabbit holes, and the one task you laid out for the day it's Wednesday, and the task you laid out to get done Monday is not it's not finished.
Yeah. It
And
happens when life gets in the way.
yeah, you just keep kind of kicking the can down the road. The two books I read were like Deep Work and The One Thing by Gary Keller. And
Mm.
just finding that undistracted time in the morning where you're not answering emails, you're being very intentional, and then actually scheduling leisure time, time where you're
Yeah.
just like, I don't care if the office building is burning down, don't call me. Like I'm unavailable. My phone is
Yeah.
actually at my house, and I'm in a park. I really liked what you said about that, the being intentional about creating time.
Yeah. Yeah. But a lot of times, like you can't control what other people do.
Yeah.
As much as it would be awesome to be like, hey, don't Slack me for the next 2 days, it's like, it's not possible. It's never going to happen. We actually tried a deep work Wednesday at AppSumo where we had no meetings, only Slack if it's 100% necessary, and, worked for a time, and then things came up, and then it kind of went away. And so, I think what I realized at the beginning of this journey, entrepreneurial journey, is like people will always do that, right? Like things will always be in your way, and you can either get frustrated or you can say, all right, like how do I hack this to make it really easy for me to do work that I want to do and maybe not get slacked and that or bothered. And that for me is morning time. So like,
Hmm.
and 7 to 9 really isn't that intense of a time period either. It doesn't really require you to wake up that early. And I know a lot of people that do their deep work from like 5 to 8 or,
Hmm.
5 to 9, they're doing 4 hours. And I don't, I'm not at that level of stamina yet, but I think it's really important to understand the limitations in your life. And if you want something more, or you want something else to happen, then like you have to create that in your life. And that means like waking up a little earlier, like I said, and creating the time in the morning to do the things that are going to advance your life in a way that can get you the life that you want. Because I think it's easy for years to go by and turn into decades, and you have all these dreams and aspirations, and like you're not really making any progress on them, and you don't know why. Like that's a very frustrating feeling to have. And in all honesty, man, I think a lot of people are a lot more powerful than they realize. I think a lot of people try to do all these things and they get frustrated, and then they kind of life beats them down, and they subdue their creative side or their aspirations of doing anything bigger, because they think it's not for them, and their identity is kind of tied to this thing that they're doing, and as opposed to the identity being tied to being a learner or an explorer. And I think that's what a lot of a lot of successful entrepreneurs are and sexual entrepreneurs are identifying with, is like, I don't care if I fail at this thing. Like I'm not tied to this idea or not tied to this company. I'm tied to learning and growing more. And I think that's also a really important note as well. Like it's one thing to create time and then try things. And if those things don't work, which probably will happen, bro, like what are you going to do? Are you going to get frustrated and give up and say like, man, I really tried this thing, but not for me? Or are you going to keep going and really lean into it? So yeah, man, I think some things that I've learned over the last couple of years and I want to continue to invest in for myself and be more effective. I think that's what I've realized is like all hours are not created equally. One person can work for 9 hours on one thing and one person can work for 30 minutes on one thing, and they would get to the same result. So and that's what I love about entrepreneurship. It's about like solving problems, but like also being lazy. Like I don't have a lot of time or money or maybe patience to do this thing, and so I want to get the easiest possible route to solve this problem. And I think that's really good entrepreneurs have that attitude of they're able to solve these problems and like do it in half the time or a quarter of the time, and then like keep going, and being creative about how they're approaching it.
That thing with people getting beat down and kind of, I don't know if giving up's the right word, but where they just kind of are like, they kind of accept their fate, I suppose. That's something that's really hard to see, but I see it happen often where, I mean, I think everybody that tries something new definitely goes through that, where if it doesn't work out, you just kind of almost have to take a period of time to like step back before jumping in again. And yeah, Nick, we've talked a lot about growth and startups and life and making time. Somebody was an entrepreneur, getting into being an entrepreneur, launching a new product, and you had like one piece of like key advice that you feel like could make the difference for them on their journey, what would that piece of advice be?
It's a good question. I think the piece of advice that I would give someone that wants to get into entrepreneurship is how can you start something with the lowest possible lift and stress that you can to make your first dollar on the internet. And I think a lot of people, one, go into it with these kinds of illusions of grandeur of what they could do and maybe what they should be doing as an entrepreneur. And a lot of times I see that as like working on the wrong things at the very beginning, which is I want to build a website that's super fancy and looks awesome. I want the best looking logo that I can possibly design, and it's just going to be so awesome. And then like they spend a lot of money and they don't really get anywhere. And so this is a very common pitfall that I see people fall into, especially first time entrepreneurs. And I would say that doesn't really matter. The really only thing that matters is what are you really good at? What are you uniquely positioned to maybe start something in? Understand that about yourself first before you even start anything. Like, what am I really good at? What is my superpower? Okay, do I understand that? Ask your friends. Is this something that you would come to me for? And if so, maybe this is something that I should explore. I think a great way to get into entrepreneurship is freelancing or consulting with this superpower that you have. And it's very low lift. You don't need a website. You don't need to have any fancy sales techniques. You just need to talk to people and be like, hey, I do this thing. I design for this company and I think I can design for you too. Like, would you pay me for this? And that's all entrepreneurship is, I think, or all it has to be. But a lot of people overcomplicate that, especially at the very beginning. And so look for the easiest route to get into it because it can evolve into a lot of different routes once you get started. But most people get frustrated and quit before they even start. And they get really, I think, discouraged also by failure. Like, oh man, this was way too hard. Or I spent too much money. I can't do it. It doesn't have to be that way. I think everybody should be and really is on the inside an entrepreneur. Going back to our ancestors 60, 70,000 years ago, everybody created and hunted and gathered for themselves and for their community. They didn't have a company that was like paying them in berries. They went and did it themselves. They solved the problems and got creative to do it. So like it exists within all of us. So I think there's like an innate need for all of us to like let out this creativity and go solve problems using our mind and thinking for ourselves. Like that's what entrepreneurship is. And doing that in a way that's really easy to start is really, really important. I think another great route to get into is buying a business. I bought a business a couple of years ago and sold it last month for about double what I bought it. And it was an awesome journey. And it doesn't really require a lot of resources or know-how to get into. You can buy a profitable business. And if it's uniquely positioned to benefit from the talent that you have, maybe on the operations or sales or marketing side, then you can do it. And it's a great way to get into entrepreneurship and learn a lot of things quickly. Start small, focus on getting money first and not focus on a logo or things that don't really matter. and go the easy route, especially if you have a job, because you can get burnt out and stressed really quickly if you're trying to take on too many things at once.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen and learn, and hopefully you got a few nuggets of wisdom out of this too. One quick favor I have to ask is, if you're listening to this on Spotify, give us a quick 5-star review, or on Apple Podcasts, or wherever your favorite podcast listening platform is. If you could give us a 5-star review, share this with your friends if you think they might find it to be interesting. Would greatly appreciate that. That's pretty much it for this episode. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in, and I look forward to seeing you next time.